"This is not a retirement home for you, Walter." Erica said it quietly, the way you'd tell a stranger to move his car. Not loud, not cruel-sounding, if you didn't know her, just final. The dishwasher was running behind her, and somewhere upstairs a television laugh track kept looping, and I remember thinking how strange it was that the room smelled like pot roast while she was telling me I didn't belong in it. I didn't say anything back. 42 years of marriage and 4 years of widowhood teach a man when silence is the stronger answer. What she didn't know, what none of them knew, not yet, was that the paycheck her husband deposited every other Friday had my signature drying on it 3 days before his. 3 months earlier, nobody in that house would have believed it would come to this. My name is Walter Kessler. Everyone who's known me longer than a week calls me Walt. I'm 67 years old, and for 40 years I made my living the way my father did, pulling wire, reading blueprints, and teaching apprentices that electricity doesn't care about your excuses, only your attention. I served 4 years in the Navy as an electrician's mate before that, on a destroyer tender out of Norfolk, and I've never once mentioned that to impress anybody. I mention it now only because it's where I learned the 2 things that got me through the rest of my life: how to stay calm when something's about to blow, and how to fix a problem quietly instead of making a show of fixing it. I grew up and grew old in a town called Millers Creek, Ohio, the kind of place where the hardware store owner knows your dog's name and the diner still has a payphone nobody's used since 2009, bolted to the wall like a monument to a version of the town that doesn't exist anymore. I built Kessler Electric from a single truck and a folding ladder into a company that, at its peak, had 11 trucks on the road and a waiting list 3 weeks long. My wife Sarah kept the books for 31 of those years, sitting at our kitchen table with a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Cook," correcting my spelling on invoices and telling me when a client was trying to talk me down on price out of habit rather than need. Sarah died 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. The kind that doesn't give you time to prepare, only time to say goodbye, if you're lucky. And we were lucky, in that one narrow way. I sold the company 2 years after that. Not all of it, but enough of it, in a way I'll get to. And I moved through my days the way a lot of men my age do after losing the person who translated the world for them. Slowly, carefully, alone, but trying not to make that anyone else's problem. We had one son, Danny, Daniel Walter Kessler, 34 years old, an electrician, like his old man, though he never wanted to run the business the way I did. He wanted to run it his own way, modern, with an app for scheduling, and a website with a logo I couldn't pronounce the font of. I was proud of that. I still am. 4 years ago, at Sarah's funeral, Danny introduced me, really introduced me, the way you do when you want someone in your life to matter, to a young woman named Erica Voss. She had dark, quick eyes and a laugh that filled up a room, and she held my hand at the funeral home a beat longer than she needed to and said, "I'm so sorry, Mr. Kessler. Danny talks about his mom like she hung the moon." I liked her for that sentence for a long time. They married a year later. I walked Danny's mother's memory down the aisle with them, in the sense that I wore her wedding ring on a chain under my shirt that day, and I gave a short toast that made people laugh and one woman cry, and I meant every word of it. I tell you all this because I need you to understand that this isn't a story about a man who disliked his daughter-in-law from the start. I liked Erica. For a long time I loved her, the uncomplicated way you love the person who makes your son happy. This is a story about how slowly things can go wrong, and how long a good man can convince himself he's imagining it. 2 years ago, Danny came to me with a look on his face I recognized, because I'd worn it myself more than once in 40 years of self-employment. It's the look of a man doing arithmetic in his head that keeps landing on a number he doesn't like. "Dad," he said, sitting across from me at my kitchen table. The same table, same coffee rings worn into the wood. "I want to buy Kessler Electric from you. The whole thing. Not just take it over when you're gone. Buy it. Make it mine." I'd sold him 60% of the company the year before, at a price so far below what it was worth that my accountant, Ron Pastor, actually laughed out loud in his office, one short bark of disbelief, before he caught himself and apologized. I kept 40% quiet, not because I didn't trust Danny. I trusted Danny with my life, but because Sarah used to say, Never give away the whole ladder, Walt. Keep one rung for yourself, so you can always climb back up if someone needs you to. I didn't tell Danny I still owned 40%. He believed, like everyone else believed, that I'd fully retired and fully sold out, and that Kessler Electric was entirely his and Erica's now, on paper as much as in practice. I let him believe that, not to deceive him, to let him stand on his own 2 feet without his father's shadow standing behind him at every job walkthrough and every bank meeting. What Danny didn't know, what I didn't tell him, because there are things a father protects his son from the way he protects him from anything, including the truth of how close to the edge he's standing, was that Kessler Electric, under Danny's management, had come within 6 weeks of missing payroll, twice. The first time, 18 months ago, Danny called Ron Pastore in a panic on a Tuesday night, and Ron, bound by the partnership paperwork I'd insisted on keeping quietly in place, called me. I wired $41,000 into the company's operating account before Wednesday's payroll run. Danny found the money in the account, assumed it was a delayed customer payment finally clearing, and never asked further questions, because when you're 32 years old and drowning, you don't interrogate the life preserver, you just grab it. The second time was worse. A commercial client, a strip mall developer 3 towns over, went bankrupt, owing Kessler Electric almost $90,000 for finished work. Danny had extended too much credit to one customer, the classic mistake every small contractor makes, once, usually only once, because the lesson is expensive enough the first time that you never repeat it. I covered that gap too, quietly, through the silent 40% stake and a personal line of credit Sarah and I had built over 3 decades of never once missing a mortgage payment. I never told Danny. I told myself I was protecting his pride. Looking back now, with the particular clarity that only comes after you've been humiliated in your own son's kitchen, I think I was protecting something else too, the last thing that made me feel useful. A retired man needs somewhere his hands still matter. Mine had stopped mattering with a wrench. They still mattered with a checkbook. It was around that same time, 18 months ago, give or take, that Danny asked if I'd consider moving in with them for a while. My hip had started giving me trouble, the kind of trouble that turns, "I'll just run to the store," into a 20-minute negotiation with your own joints. And my house, the house Sarah and I raised Danny in, had a lot of stairs and a lot of quiet, in that order. "Just till you're steadier on your feet, Dad," Danny said. "We've got the basement finished. Full bath, kitchenette, the whole in-law setup. Erica already said it's fine. I want to be fair here, because fairness matters more than making myself the hero of my own story. Erica did say it was fine, and in the beginning she meant it. She helped me pick out a recliner for the basement. She taped a laminated card to my mini-fridge with the Wi-Fi password and a smiley face in blue Sharpie. For the first few months, she'd come down some evenings with 2 mugs of decaf and sit on the ottoman while I told her stories about Sarah, laughing at the right places, going quiet at the right places, and I thought, my son married someone who understands that a family isn't a transaction. I sold my house 8 months after moving in. Practical reasons. Upkeep, taxes, the stairs, the loneliness of 5 empty rooms. And I split the proceeds 3 ways without telling anyone the third part. A third to a scholarship fund at the vocational school, where I used to guest lecture on residential wiring codes. A third into the same account that had twice, quietly, saved my son's company, and a third I kept for myself, modest, the kind of number that lets an old man buy his grandkids Christmas presents without checking a balance first. I want you to hold on to that detail. The scholarship fund. It matters later, though not in the way you'd expect. The slow burn, that's the only way I know to describe how it changed, didn't announce itself. It came in inches. It came first as a change in the mail schedule. Erica started collecting the mail before I could get down the driveway on my cane, and one Tuesday I noticed a bank statement from Ron Pastore's office, the account statement for the 40% stake nobody but Ron and I were supposed to see, sitting askew in the recycling bin under a flattened cereal box, as though it had been read and hidden rather than simply thrown away. I told myself I was imagining that. It came as small comments at dinner. "Dad, you know Miller's Creek has some really nice senior communities now," Erica said one night in March, passing the green beans. her tone as light as a weather report. Judy from my book club moved into one on Ferris Road. Says the food's better than home cooking. And there's a pool. I'm not much of a swimmer, I said. And Danny laughed. And Erica smiled too. But her smile didn't travel up to her eyes the way Danny's did. And I noticed that. And then I told myself I was imagining that too. It came as a text message I wasn't supposed to see, glowing on the kitchen counter one evening, while Erica ran upstairs for something, and her phone sat face up next to the fruit bowl. I wasn't looking for it. I was reaching past it for an apple. But the screen was lit, and the message on it, from a name saved as Court at Realty, read, "Nursery could go in the basement if he's not down there. Send me listings for assisted living near Miller's Creek when you get a sec. Want to be ready to talk numbers with Danny." I put the apple back. I don't remember deciding to. My hand just did it. The way your hand pulls back from a hot stove before your brain finishes the sentence, "That's hot." Erica was pregnant. Nobody had told me yet. I found that out from a real estate agent's text message about turning my bedroom into a nursery. I sat with that for 3 days before I said a word to anyone, turning it over like a piece of wire I couldn't figure out where to run. 3 days of watching Erica across the dinner table, warmer than she'd been in weeks, almost performing warmth, bringing me an extra blanket, asking about my hip, and I understood, the way you understand a short circuit before you can prove it, that the warmth had a shape to it. Be nice to him until it's time to tell him to go. The turning point came on a Sunday, the 3rd week of April, when Danny took the boys, my grandsons, Cole and Max, 7 and 5, to a Little League game 2 towns over, and it was just Erica and me in the house. I was on the back porch with a crossword and a mug of decaf, and the kitchen window was cracked, and I heard Erica on the phone with her sister, Melissa, in Columbus. She wasn't whispering. She didn't think anyone was listening, and there's a kind of honesty that only comes out when a person believes they're alone, and I've come to think that honesty is more true than the kind we perform for company. No, I know, but it's a lot, Mel. He's down there all the time. It's not like he's helping. He just sits there, and Danny won't say anything because it's his dad, obviously. But I'm the one who has to, manage it. And now with the baby coming, we need that space. And I don't know how to say, "We need you to leave to a 67-year-old widower" without sounding like a monster. So I'm just gonna, ease him into it. Bring up the senior places enough times that it feels like his idea. A pause. Then, quieter, meaner. The way a person's voice drops when they've decided the worst version of a sentence is also the truest one. I mean, it's not like he's contributing anything financially. Danny bought the business fair and square. Walter's just here, living off Danny's paycheck, basically. This is not a retirement home. I didn't sign up to run one. I sat very still on that porch. My crossword pen was still capped in my hand. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked twice and stopped. This is not a retirement home. She'd say that same sentence to my face 3 weeks later, almost word for word, as though she'd rehearsed it enough times in private that it came out smooth in public. But that Sunday afternoon, hearing it through a cracked window, aimed at her sister, and not at me, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day Ron Pastore called to tell me about the missed payroll deadline 18 months earlier. The specific, cold clarity of a man who now knows exactly where he stands, and exactly what he's going to do about it, and is not, under any circumstances, going to do it with raised voice. Living off Danny's paycheck. I thought about the wire transfers. $41,000, one Tuesday night. $87,000. One long, quiet month I never mentioned to anyone. I thought about the 40% of Kessler Electric, sitting in an account with my name on it. An account that had, more than once, been the only thing standing between Danny's paycheck, existing at all, and it simply not existing that week. I didn't confront her that day. I want to be honest about why. Not because I was too hurt, though I was, and not because I was plotting some grand reveal, though I understand why it might look that way in the retelling. I didn't confront her that day because I needed to be sure that this wasn't grief talking, sure that this wasn't an old man's wounded pride mishearing a private complaint that every daughter-in-law is entitled to have, once, to her sister, about a full house, and a coming baby, and a life that feels crowded. So I waited, and I watched, And over the next 3 weeks, I watched the campaign Erica had described to her sister unfold exactly as she'd promised it would. Brochures for the Maples at Ferris Road left, with studied casualness, on the kitchen counter. Comments about, when you're settled somewhere with people your own age. A conversation, once, where she used the phrase, aging in place isn't always the safest option, in a tone she must have practiced, because it didn't sound like her own words at all. It sounded like something read off a pamphlet. Danny, to his credit, said nothing of the kind, not once. Danny would come down to the basement some nights just to sit with me and watch the ball game, the way he had as a boy, and I'd look at him and think, he doesn't know. He genuinely doesn't know what she said on that porch call. Doesn't know what's been simmering under the meatloaf and the green beans and the extra blanket. He was busy running a company he believed was entirely his, unaware that his father's signature was still quietly holding up part of the roof over his head. The confrontation, if you can call something that quiet a confrontation, happened on a Thursday evening in early May, the same evening I opened this story with. Danny was working late on a job walkthrough for a school district contract. The kind of contract that, if it landed, would be the biggest single job Kessler Electric had ever won. I was at the kitchen table with the crossword again, because some habits are just company for a man who used to have a wife to talk to instead. Erica came in from picking up coal from baseball practice, tired the way pregnant women are tired in their 6th month, and something in her had reached the end of its patience that day. Maybe a hard day at work, maybe just the weight of a plan rehearsed in private, finally demanding to be spoken aloud. "Walter," she said, setting her keys down harder than the moment required. "Can we talk?" "Sure," I said, and closed the crossword, and folded my hands, the way I used to fold them across a conference table from a client who was about to try to talk me down on price. "I've been thinking," she said, and I watched her reach for the rehearsed version of the sentence, the one she'd practiced on her sister, about space, about the baby coming, about, honestly, about what's fair to Danny. He worked so hard, and this house was supposed to be ours, and I love you, I do, but I think it might be time to start looking at some other options for you. There are some really lovely places. I could even help you tour a few." "Erica," I said, "are you asking me to move out?" She flinched, just slightly, at hearing it said plainly instead of gently. "I'm asking you to think about what's next. This is not a retirement home for you, Walter. It's our family's house. Danny works so hard for this house, for this life, and I don't think it's fair that—" "That what?" I said. "Not sharp, just steady. Say the rest of the sentence, Erica." She looked at me, really looked, for the first time in that conversation, and something in my voice must have told her that the version of this discussion she'd rehearsed wasn't the version that was about to happen. "That we're supporting an extra adult who isn't contributing," she said, quieter now, not taking it back. "I heard you, on the porch call with your sister 3 weeks ago," I said. "The window was open. You said I'm living off Danny's paycheck." Her face went through 3 colors in about 2 seconds. First white, then a flush of something like embarrassment, then a stubborn red that told me she'd decided, on the spot, to stand behind what she'd said rather than apologize for it. I respected that, oddly, even in the moment. I've never trusted people who fold the instant they're caught. "Well, isn't that true?" she said. "You sold the business to Danny. You're retired. You live here, you eat our food, you use our utilities, and Danny's the one clocking 60-hour weeks to pay for all of it. I'm not trying to be cruel. I'm being honest." "You're half right," I said. "I am retired. I don't work a job anymore. But I want to ask you something, Erica, and I want you to think carefully before you answer, because I think you already know part of the answer and haven't let yourself look straight at it. Whose name is on the account that covered payroll at Kessler Electric 18 months ago, when Danny came within 4 days of not being able to pay his crew?" She blinked. "What are you talking about? We've never missed payroll." "You haven't," I agreed, because I made sure of it. $41,000, wired the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, 18 months back, and again, 11 months ago, when the Baymore Plaza job went under, and took $90,000 of Kessler Electric's receivables down with it. I covered that too. That's not— Danny sold you out. He bought you out. You don't own any of the company anymore. He bought 60%, I said. I kept 40. Quietly. Ron Pastore has the paperwork. And Ron's the one who called me both times the company needed rescuing. Because Ron knows what I never told Danny, that his father is still, on paper, his single largest financial safety net. Every payroll Danny's ever run in the last 4 years, he's run it on time, in full, in part because his father made sure the company underneath him never actually fell. So when you say I'm living off Danny's paycheck, Erica, I'd ask you to sit with the fact that for a stretch of 18 months, Danny's paycheck, and every paycheck of every electrician and apprentice on his crew, existed because I was paying it, quietly, from an account you didn't know existed, so that your husband could keep believing he'd built this alone. The kitchen was very quiet. Somewhere upstairs, one of the boys' video games chimed a tinny victory jingle, oblivious. I'm not telling you this to win an argument, I said, and I meant it, and I want you to believe I meant it, because there was no triumph in me in that moment, only a tiredness that went down to the bone. I'm telling you because you don't get to write the story of what I contribute to this house without the whole story. I've never once said any of this to Danny, because I didn't want him carrying the weight of knowing how close it came, both times. I still don't want him carrying that weight, but I won't sit at a dinner table and be told I'm a freeloader by someone who doesn't know what she's talking about. Erica sat down slowly at the table, across from me, the anger draining out of her face and leaving something rawer behind it. Not defeated exactly, but unmoored, the way a person looks when a floor they were standing on turns out not to be where they thought it was. Why didn't you tell him? She asked, quieter now. Same reason I didn't tell you, I said. Pride's a strange thing to manage in a family. Too much of it, and you can't ask for help. Too little, and you can't let your son believe in himself without an asterisk. I was trying to thread a needle. I don't know if I threaded it right. Danny came home an hour later, exhausted and pleased. The school district had verbally committed to the contract that afternoon, pending paperwork, the biggest win of his career, and walked into a kitchen where his wife and his father were sitting across from each other in a silence that clearly wasn't the comfortable kind. What happened? He said, setting his hard hat on the counter, and I watched Erica's face do something complicated, a kind of internal argument playing out behind her eyes about whether to protect herself or tell the truth. And then, to her credit, and I want to be fair to her here, because this is the moment that mattered most in the whole story, she chose the truth. I told your dad it was time for him to think about moving into a senior community, she said, and he told me some things about the company I didn't know. Danny looked at me. I've seen that face on him twice before in his life. Once when he was 9 and I told him his dog, Chief, wasn't coming home from the vet, and once at Sarah's bedside, in the last week, when the doctor said the word days instead of months. It's the face of a person absorbing something too large to fit through the door of a normal moment. What things? He said. I told him. All of it. This time, out loud, in his own kitchen, with his wife sitting across from us both. The 40%, the 2 rescues, the 18 months of quiet wire transfers he'd mistaken for late customer payments, and lucky timing. I watched something in my son's understanding of his own life rearrange itself in real time, the pride he'd built brick by brick over 4 years of believing he'd done this alone, and the strange, complicated grief of learning that a portion of that pride had been, in fact, a gift, disguised as a coincidence, given by a father who loved him too much to let him see it as charity. You let me think I built this myself, Danny said, and his voice cracked on the word myself, in a way that told me this was going to take longer to heal than one conversation could manage. You did build it yourself, I said. You ran every job. You hired every apprentice. You made every decision that mattered, day to day, for 4 years. I just made sure the ladder didn't fall out from under you on 2 nights when it might have. That's not the same as building it for you, Danny. That's just what a father does, if he's got the means and the sense to do it quietly. Danny didn't say anything for a long moment. Then he pulled out the 3rd kitchen chair and sat down, heavily, between his wife and his father, in the position, I thought later, of a man trying to hold 2 ends of a rope that had suddenly gone taut in opposite directions. I won't pretend the weeks after that were easy, or that everything resolved itself the way it does in the stories, where a man makes one speech, and the whole family reorganizes itself around a new understanding by the next commercial break. It didn't work that way. Real repair never does. For the first week, Erica and I barely spoke. Not out of hostility. I don't believe it was hostility. Not by the end. But out of the particular awkwardness of two people who'd each said something true and unflattering about the other, in the other's hearing, and now had to figure out how to exist in the same house, while that truth settled like dust after a demolition. Danny took it hardest, in some ways, because Danny had to relitigate 4 years of his own history in his head. Every hire he'd made, believing it was his own risk to take. Every hard month he'd survived, believing it was his own resilience that got him through it. I watched him go quiet for entire dinners, working through something I recognized because I'd done the same math myself, decades earlier, when my own father had quietly co-signed a loan for my very first truck and never told me until years later that he had. Did I earn any of it? Danny asked me one night on the back porch, the same porch where Erica had made her phone call to her sister, though he didn't know that detail and I didn't tell him. Some things a father keeps to himself even in the name of honesty. You earned all of it, I said. A safety net doesn't do the walking for you, Danny. It just means that if you fall, you don't hit the ground as hard. You still had to walk the wire. I just made sure that if you slipped, you wouldn't lose everything on the way down. There's no shame in that. The shame would have been letting you fall when I had the means not to let you. He nodded, slowly, and didn't say anything else for a while, and we sat there in the dark listening to the cicadas the way Sarah and I used to, and I thought, this is the part nobody puts in the highlight reel of a hard conversation. The long, quiet after, where nothing's resolved yet, but nothing's actively breaking either. The turn, the real turn, not the dramatic one in the kitchen, but the slow one that actually mattered, came about 3 weeks later, on a Sunday, when Erica knocked on the basement door before coming down, which she'd never done before. She'd always just called down the stairs. She had 2 mugs of decaf, the way she used to, before all of this. She set one in front of me on the little table by my recliner, and sat on the ottoman, the way she used to, and for a while neither of us said anything, and the silence wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't hostile either. It was the silence of 2 people deciding whether to try again. I owe you an apology, she said finally. Not just for the senior living thing, for the phone call, for thinking of you as a line item, a cost. You've been more careful with this family's money and this family's dignity than I gave you credit for, and I said something cruel about a man who was quietly making sure my husband could pay his crew, and I don't have a good excuse for that, except that I was scared about the baby and the space and the money, and it was easier to be angry at you than to be scared out loud. I understand scared, I said. I've been scared plenty of times in my life, and said things I regretted to people who didn't deserve them. Sarah forgave me more than once for that. I'm not in any position to hold a grudge about it. I still think we need to talk about space, she said, and I felt something in my chest brace, out of old habit, and then she added, quickly, but not like before. Not you need to leave. More like, is there a way to make the basement work better for a baby and for you both? Maybe we finish out the room over the garage for you instead, so you've got more privacy, and the baby gets the basement nursery near our room. I don't want to push you out of this house, Walter. I want to figure out how you stay in it, in a way that works for everybody, including you. It wasn't forgiveness delivered all at once, gift-wrapped, the way it sometimes is in the stories that wrap up too neatly. It was an offer of continued effort. I've come to believe, at 67, that continued effort is worth more than most grand gestures, because grand gestures are easy to perform once, and effort is the thing you actually have to keep choosing. I'd like that, I said. The room over the garage. Over the next 2 months, the house rebuilt itself in small increments, the way a body heals, not visibly, day to day, but undeniably, if you compare the before and after. Danny finished the room over the garage himself, on weekends, with his own hands, the way his father had taught him, running the wiring himself instead of subcontracting it out, and he made a point of showing me every step, the way an apprentice shows a master, not because the master doesn't know how it's done, but because showing is its own kind of thank you. Erica started coming down some evenings again with 2 mugs of decaf, and eventually those evenings moved upstairs, once the new room was finished, and became evenings on the back porch instead. The 3 of us, sometimes 4, once Cole and Max were done with homework, and Erica started asking me about Sarah again, unprompted, the way she used to before all of this, and I started telling her stories again, and I noticed she went quiet at the right places, the way she used to. I told Ron Pastor quietly to draw up new paperwork, not to take my 40% back, but to convert it, formally, into Danny's name outright, effective immediately, no strings, no silent safety net anymore, because if Danny was going to walk the wire, I decided he should walk it, knowing exactly how high up he was, with no net beneath him except his own 2 hands, and whatever help he chose, from now on, to ask for out loud. I told him this on a Saturday morning, at the same kitchen table where he'd once asked to buy the business, 4 years after I'd first sold him 60%. "You don't have to do that," Danny said. "I know I don't have to," I said. "I want to. You've more than earned it, and I think we've both learned something about what it costs a family to keep secrets, even the well-meant kind. From here on out, if Kessler Electric needs help, you come and ask me, out loud, like a grown man asking his father, instead of finding mystery money in an account and telling yourself it was luck. Deal?" He looked at me for a long moment, and then he did something he hadn't done since he was maybe 12 years old. He came around the table and hugged me, hard, the kind of hug that says things a person isn't ready to say out loud yet. "Deal," he said, into my shoulder. The baby came in late July. A girl, Sarah Ann Kessler, named for her grandmother, which nobody asked me about beforehand, and which undid me more completely than almost anything else in this whole story. I held her on the same recliner Erica had helped me pick out 18 months earlier, in the basement that used to be a battlefield of unspoken resentments, and was now just a guest room where a baby monitor sat on the dresser next to Sarah's photograph, which Erica had put there herself, without being asked. "She's got Sarah's eyes," Erica said, standing in the doorway, watching me hold her granddaughter. "She's got somebody's stubborn chin," I said. "I think that one's yours." Erica laughed, really laughed, the room-filling laugh I'd first liked her for, all those years ago at the funeral home, and for the first time in a long time, I let myself believe the house had actually healed, rather than simply calmed down. Last month on a Thursday evening, a year, almost to the week, since the porch phone call that started all of it, Danny hosted the crew from Kessler Electric for a cookout in the backyard to celebrate the school district contract finally closing, the biggest job the company had ever landed, entirely on Danny's own steam, no safety net beneath him this time except the one he'd chosen to build himself, out of 11 employees who trusted him and a wife who'd learned to say the hard thing kindly instead of the cruel thing quietly. There's a chair at that table now, an old, sturdy oak chair that used to sit at Sarah's and my kitchen table in the house I sold, that Danny asked me, specifically, to bring over and keep at the head of their table, so Grandpa's got his own spot, permanent, not a guest spot. Little Sarah Ann was asleep against Erica's shoulder. Cole and Max were chasing each other around the yard with sparklers, because it was close enough to the 4th that Danny couldn't resist buying a box. And Erica came and sat next to me in the second-to-last light of the evening, and she didn't say anything for a while, and then she said, "Thank you for not giving up on us, even after I said what I said. Thank you for figuring out the difference between being scared and being right," I said. "Most people never learn it. You learned it in a summer." If there's a lesson in all of this, and I've turned it over enough nights on that back porch to believe there is one, it's this: the people who love us hardest sometimes protect us with silence, and the people who resent us hardest sometimes speak in half-truths, and both of those habits can wreck a family just as fast as outright cruelty can, if nobody ever says the whole sentence out loud. I kept a safety net secret to protect my son's pride. Erica kept a resentment secret until it curdled into something crueler than she meant it to be. We both learned, the hard way, that a family runs on the same principle as a good electrical system. Everything has to be grounded, and nothing stays hidden in the walls forever, without eventually causing a spark. If this story reminded you of someone in your own life, a parent who gave more than they ever let on, or a moment you said something in anger that you later had to walk all the way back. I'd ask you to do two things. Share this video with them, even if it feels awkward to send. And leave a comment telling us about the person in your life you should probably thank out loud, the way I finally got thanked, a year late, on a back porch, by a daughter-in-law who turned out to have more courage than either of us gave her credit for at the start. Take care of the people paying your bills quietly, whoever they turn out to be, and take care of each other. I'm Walter Kessler. Thanks for listening.